Did y'all miss me? Hey, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it also, and in addition to that as well. Hey, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Did you know I post college football videos almost every single day of the year? It's true. Some of them are even watchable. That determination, of course, is left up to you, the viewer. You can let me know in the comment section down below at the end of this video if you think this one was watchable or not. Also, be sure and let me know what I say in the video that you disagree with. Especially if you disagree with the overall record or who you think these teams might beat or lose to. And of course, kicking the preview and predictions off today for 2021 with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Every offseason around this time, I do an entire series of these preview and prediction videos. We're going to look at briefly last year, just what they did. Then take a look at what they lost from last year, what they have coming back this year, strengths, weaknesses. Finally, we'll put the schedule up on the screen. We'll go through it game by game, and I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single game on the schedule. I'm going to try to do this for 50 or 60 teams. Going to do it here the last week of June, all of July, all of August, leading up to the start of college football at the end of August, beginning of September. And like I mentioned, up first this year, Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now that I'm back to doing these preview and prediction videos, guess what else is back? That's right, Uncle Lou's copious notes. You already know. All right, Notre Dame 2020, let's wrap it up. They went 10-2 in a shortened coronavirus season, right? Well, no sense in going through all that on these videos. We all know what happened last year. The schedules were weird. Notre Dame was actually in the ACC last year for the first and only time in school history. They did manage to make it to the ACC title game before getting beat by Clemson, their first loss of the year. They suffered their second loss of the year in the first round of the playoffs to Alabama, finishing 10-2. Brian Kelly, been there for a long time. Brian Kelly's been there now since 2010. And overall, I think you would have to say he's been pretty successful, at least in terms of wins and losses. Notre Dame still has the problem of not being able to win a big postseason game going back to 1992. They've lost 9 or 10 big postseason games in a row. And by big postseason games, I mean BCS games, New Year's Six games, championship games, and playoff games. They're 0 for 10, and only one of those games really has even been competitive. Notre Dame's average margin of loss in those major postseason games is 25 points, and they lost last year to Alabama 31-14. They lose their defensive coordinator, Clark. Is it Lee or Leah? I'm not sure. He leaves to become the head coach of Andy, and say what you want about Notre Dame, and believe me, I know because I'm guilty of it too. We all like to hate and rag on Notre Dame. Hasn't been a whole lot to rag on when it comes to their defense over the last few years. Clark Lee had that defense playing at a really high level. He's gone, off to Vandy. His replacement from Cincinnati, another team that had a really good defense the last couple of years. People can clown, say whatever they want about the Georgia versus Cincinnati game last year what game was it? Peach Bowl? The New Year's Six game. That was a good win for Georgia. Cincinnati was a good team last year, and one of the biggest reasons why, of course, was their defense. So they get Marcus Freeman from Cincinnati now to take over that defense at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly does return. Here's his, as head coach, here's his win totals now, going back to his start in South Bend in 2010. Win totals by year: 8, 12, 9, 8, 10, 4, 10, 12, 11, 10. Outside of that 1-4 win season, he's been pretty successful in terms of wins and losses at Notre Dame. Of course, like mentioned before, yet to get over the hump of winning a big postseason game. But Notre Dame seems to be in it towards the end of the year more times than they're not. They've made the playoffs twice under Brian Kelly. They made it in 2018 and then again last year in 2020. They did not make it in 2017 or 2019. Now, why would they make it in 18 and 20, but not 17 and 19? What was different in the 17 and 19 seasons for Notre Dame versus the 18 and 20 seasons? What could it possibly be? Oh, yeah, that's right. They didn't have to play Georgia in 18 and 20. That's why they made the playoffs. All right, let's take a look at their offense for 2021. Who they lost, who's coming back. You know, guys know how we do this here. 9 starters gone off that offense from last year, including 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen and quarterback Ian Book, who won 30 games in his time at Notre Dame. 2 undefeated regular seasons Ian Book had at Notre Dame too. Not going to be easy for Notre Dame to replace that amount of talent with that many starters on offense in 1 year. Notre Dame's got some talent. It's young and inexperienced talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. To try to help things out there, they bring in a graduate transfer from Wisconsin and quarterback Jack Cohn. He was okay at Whiskey. Wisconsin has been sort of a ground and pound and play defense team for a long time, and they've had sort of game managing QBs. Jack Cohn kind of fits that mold. I think he was better than the average Wisconsin QB over the last 10 years, but he wasn't great. He's not the type of player that's necessarily going to win a game for you if you need him to, but he's not going to lose very many games for you either. He completed 70% of his passes at Wisconsin, mostly short to intermediate range. We're going to talk more about that for a second when we get to the wide receiver situation at Notre Dame, but he's the likely starter at quarterback this year for Notre Dame. Running back Kyron Williams, one of their best players on offense last year. He ran for almost 1,200 yards in a shortened season as a redshirt freshman, but again, they lose 4 of the 5 offensive linemen from last year. Notre Dame had one of the best, most talented, and experienced offensive lines in all of America last year. This year, they're going to have one of the least experienced offensive lines in all of America, only returning the 1 starter. They also have Chris Tyree back there in the backfield. He's more of a speed back. He's faster than Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams more the north to south type of guy, whereas Chris Tyree sort of a third down, get around the edge, speedster type of running back. A good combination to have at running back. Most of your big teams these days are rotating at least 2 running backs in and out of the game. And a lot of times they bring a different skill sets. You'll have sort of your between the tackles, short yardage, first and second down backs. And then you have a lot of these specialty third down sort of speedster, can catch swing passes out of the backfield type of thing on third down. And that's what Notre Dame has here with Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree. Tight end, another bright spot on the offense for Notre Dame heading into 2021. They had one of the best freshman tight ends in America last year in Michael Mayer. Probably an All-American this year coming up. Definitely a preseason All-American candidate. Anybody would be surprised if he ends up being one of the best, if not the best tight ends in all of America in 2021. Wide receivers, they lose some and they get some back. Now, like a lot of teams, they played a lot of wide receivers last year. You have your starting 3 or 4, but teams are playing 6 and 7 wide receivers in a game. So they have some experience there, but they got to stretch the field more. That was something they kind of had a hard time doing the last couple of years with Ian Book. And unfortunately, with Jack Cohn coming in, he doesn't have a ton of experience getting vertical with the ball either. I mentioned before, he completes passes at a high percentage, 70% back in 2019 at Wisconsin, the last time he started a full season. Most of those were short to intermediate passes. Notre Dame, and the age we're in now, the way offenses are going now, they're going to have to start stretching the field more. We'll see if these wide receivers and Jack Cohn come up with some chemistry and try to get the ball downfield. We'll see. Defense, I mentioned, they lose their defensive coordinator. That's a big loss. They also lose the best player on their defense from last year, linebacker Owusu Karamoah. Again, I don't name these players, so it's not my job to pronounce their name right. I just do the best I can to screw it up, and I usually do a pretty successful job of that. He was the best player last year. He's gone off to the NFL, as are both defensive ends from last year. Bright spot, defensive tackles, the interior of that Notre Dame defensive line, very deep, very talented, very experienced. That'll be a strong suit for Notre Dame in 2021. You also get linebacker Drew White back, sort of the quarterback of the defense, leader of the defense the last couple of years. He'll be one of, if not the best players on the defense this year. Although I think probably, is it Kyle Hamilton? Yeah, Kyle Hamilton, I think. I forgot to write his name now. He's safety. He might be the best player on Notre Dame's team, period. Regardless, offense, defense, whatever. He's really, really good. A future NFL player for sure. He's a junior this year. And in my opinion, probably the best player on the team. All right, let's put Notre Dame's schedule up on the screen and see what they're going to do. All right, here it is. Of course, Notre Dame now back to not being in the ACC after being in it for just the 1 year last year, losing in the ACC title game to Clemson, keeping Notre Dame's streak intact of never winning a conference title. How long has Notre Dame been playing football? 120, 130 years, 0 conference titles. Managed to keep that streak going last year with a giant L to the Tater in the ACC title game. No chance to get back to the ACC title game this year. They're back to being an independent, although they do have a contract with the ACC to play at least 5 ACC teams, as you can see by looking at the schedule. Now, I'm going to be honest. My overall thoughts of Notre Dame this year are that they're going to be pretty good. I don't think the four win year that Brian Kelly had was an anomaly. Again, I read off the win totals. They range from 8 to 12 wins a year. I don't see any reason Notre Dame doesn't fall somewhere within that range this year. I don't see that 4, 5, 6 win season happening that a lot of people would love to see from Notre Dame, because a lot of people love to hate Notre Dame. I don't see that happening. I also don't see a return trip to the playoffs happening for Notre Dame this year. I just think they lost too much from that offense last year, plus a new defensive coordinator. I just think that's too much for Notre Dame to overcome in 1 year to go undefeated, which is what I think they would have to do to get back to the playoffs in 2021. The schedule, not terrible. They get a few good draws from the ACC. We'll go through it game by game here, and I'll tell you a little bit about what I think about each game. But you kick things off week 1 on the road at Florida State. In an average year over the last 40 years, this would have been an amazing game. Unfortunately, Florida State's been in the toilet for the last 4 to 5 seasons. Hard to believe they won a national title in 2013 with a team that had 20 players on it out of the 22 starters that ended up getting drafted in the NFL. They've been absolutely horrible the last few years. Of course, they had a disastrous coaching hire in Willie Taggart that set them back for a few years. He's gone now. I got a new coach in there. Been there for a couple of years now. I think Florida State will be improved, but it's just hard to have a lot of faith in Florida State right now until we actually see them do something on the field. I know you got to play them there. It's week 1, so they get extra time to prepare for the game. I get all that. I just can't see Notre Dame losing this game week 1 on the road at Florida State. Now, is it possible? Well, anything's possible in college football. We see weird things all the time. And maybe this is the year Florida State finally starts to get it back together. But until I see a quarterback for Florida State come out and look competent, until I see an offensive line for Florida State that doesn't look like the worst in America, till I see them do that on the field, it's hard for me to pick Florida State to win a game against any top 25 team. And whatever we think about Notre Dame, I think we all agree they're somewhere in the top 25, at least heading into the season. I can't see Notre Dame getting this done. Florida State's got that transfer quarterback, Mackenzie Milton, who was real fun to watch 2 or 3 years ago before that gruesome injury he had. Again, this falls into the category of I've got to see him play again before I really can buy into the hype around him. I've got Notre Dame starting off 1-0 with a win on the road at Florida State. Pretty easy win the next week at home against Toledo. Nothing much to say there. They're a group of 5 team, Notre Dame. Even in I don't want to call this a rebuilding year for Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is too talented to rebuild. One thing I forgot to mention, their last 4 recruiting classes going back to 2018. I like to do this for every team. I know this isn't an exact indication of the amount of talent on a team, but it gives you a pretty good idea. I mean, you've got players that leave early. You've got players that transfer out. You've got players that transfer in. You've got players that get injured. But generally speaking, if you look at the last 4 recruiting classes that a team has had, it gives you a pretty good overall idea of the amount of talent there. This past recruiting class, they were 9. In 2020, they had the 18th ranked class. In 2019, they had the 15th ranked class. And in 2018, the 10th ranked class. So 4 top 20 classes in a row. Number 9 being the most recent there. So there's talent on Notre Dame's roster. So I don't want to call this a rebuilding type of thing for Notre Dame. But it's definitely sort of a wait till next year type of year. I think things set up good for Notre Dame next year. And again, we mentioned they've made the playoffs every other year the last couple of years, made it in 18, made it in 20. I think if Notre Dame's going to make a playoff run, maybe it comes in 2022. We got the talent to do it, just very inexperienced this year. Back to the schedule, though. You beat Florida State 1-0. You beat Toledo 2-0. Another home game after that against a Big Ten opponent, Purdue. Purdue's a funny team. Everybody looks at Purdue and goes, remember when they beat Ohio State and Rondale Moore had 1,000 yards? Yeah, I remember that. It was 3 seasons ago. They haven't been very good since then. Their head coach, Braun, was one of the hottest names in head coaching there for a year or 2. Now the guy's stuck there. He better hope he doesn't get fired, honestly. And he's on the hot seat this year, in my opinion. He could have almost had his pick of jobs a couple of years ago. Now he's in a situation where if he doesn't win this year, he could get fired from Purdue. I think Notre Dame wins that game at home over the Boilermakers. Then an interesting game here. Another one of these pointless neutral site games in the middle of the season. I don't like neutral site games. It's nothing against Notre Dame. They play Wisconsin at Soldier Field in week 4. I don't like neutral site games. Bowl games, okay. Anything else? No. I don't like Georgia playing Florida in Jacksonville. I don't like Oklahoma and Texas playing in Dallas. I don't like all these week 1 kickoff classic games like we have this year with Georgia and Clemson and Charlotte and Alabama and Miami and Atlanta. I just have this weird idea that college football games should be played on college campuses. I know that's a weird thing to think. But anyway, you play Wisconsin week 4, neutral site game, Soldier Field. I think Wisconsin beats you. I think Wisconsin, Notre Dame, you can almost just close your eyes and pencil them in for 10 wins every single year. They're both really, really good teams. The reason I'm going with Wisconsin is it's just I can't get past the losses that Notre Dame took on offense from last year to this year. The quarterback, 4 out of 5 offensive linemen, question marks at the wide receiver position. And in the quarterback you are bringing in, I'm not really convinced is a game-changing QB. I'm going to be honest, I was never all that high on Ian Book, but I do think Ian Book is better than Jack Cohn. So, no matter how good Jack Cohn plays this year, I think it's going to be a step backwards from Ian Book, and I just think Wisconsin's going to be a little bit better. This will be a good, close game. This is one of those coin flip type games to me, so I'm not trying to upset Notre Dame here, or Notre Dame fans here. I could easily have picked Notre Dame to win this game, and they could win it. I've got it penciled in as a loss right now. You're sitting at 3-1 after week 4. And then a home game against Cincinnati, and I think Cincinnati is going to beat you too. Cincinnati, as good as they've been, they're still kind of looking for that big win over a Power 5 team. They got blown out by Ohio State a couple of years ago, 42-0 in a season where they ended up going 11-2. They almost beat Georgia in a New Year's 6 game last year before losing on the last-second field goal to finish, I think, 11-1. I think this is the year they get it done. I think they're tired of coming up short. They're tired of hearing about it. We've just had the announcement about the playoffs going to 12 teams here in a few years. They're looking to prove that they belong in the top 10. And I do think Cincinnati will be in the top 10 when this game is played. Cincinnati will be in the top 10 when the season starts. I don't think they'll lose a game before this one. They'll be undefeated. You could be undefeated at 4-0. I've got you at 3-1. This will be a great game. And this is more of a doesn't Cincinnati have to win one of these games eventually type of pick than it is me picking against Notre Dame. Again, I agree Notre Dame could win this game. Notre Dame, so I've got Notre Dame at 3-2 after week 5. They could be 5-0. I will freely admit that. They could be 5-0. But I don't straddle the fence in these videos. I come down on one side or the other. I've got you sitting at 3-2 after week 5 with losses to Wisconsin and Cincinnati. Then you go on the road and play another team who's going to be looking for a head coach next year, Virginia Tech. Fuente has not worked out there. He's been borderline terrible almost every single year he's been there. Virginia Tech is one of the tougher places to play in the ACC generally, but I just think Notre Dame top to bottom is better than Virginia Tech. I think by this point, midway through the season, pressure is going to be mounting on Fuente. He'll already have a few losses stacked up, in my opinion. I think Virginia Tech takes another loss here. Notre Dame gets the win on the road in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. You're sitting at 4-2 heading into your bye week, which comes right in the middle of your season. You play 6 games, have a bye week. You come out getting ready to play your last 6 here. Bye week comes before the Southern Cal game, and it probably couldn't come at a better time. I'm actually a buyer on Southern Cal this year, which is unusual. I've been paying attention to this channel for the last few years. I'm down on Clay Helton. And I still think they should have thrown everything they had at Urban Meyer after he left Ohio State and tried to get him to come there. They decided to stick with Clay Helton. They had an okay year last year before losing in the Pac-12 title game, but they get their quarterback back, Keaton Slovis, one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football this year. I mean, of course, you got Spencer Rattler, you got the ukulele at Clemson, high expectations for Bryce Young at Alabama, JT Daniels at Georgia, Sam Howell at North Carolina. I mean, there's a lot of good quarterbacks this year. Keaton Slovis is in that list of top 4, 5, 6 QBs, wherever you want to put him. You do get Southern Cal at home. I just think they're a better team than Notre Dame this year, honestly. I have some questions about the Wisconsin and Cincy pick where I have you losing. I don't have any questions about this one. I do think Southern Cal will beat you. Definitely. This is probably one of the more confident picks I have in terms of the games I have you losing. I think Southern Cal gets it done. You're sitting at 1, 2, 3, 4-3 now after week 8. North Carolina, this is a tough 2-game stretch here. Now, the good news is you come out of a bye week, you get both these teams at home. These are 2 really, really good teams here, in my opinion. I think Southern Cal and North Carolina, both top 10 teams. I think you lose both games. I think North Carolina beats you too. Played North Carolina last year. It was close in the first half before you pulled away in the second half. North Carolina this year is sort of where Notre Dame was last year. Veteran quarterback, good offensive line. They've got to replace some running backs, but that quarterback is unbelievable, Heisman contender. A lot of young stars on that defense that played a lot last year. I think North Carolina gets it done on the road and beats Notre Dame. You're now sitting at 4-4 heading into your last 4 games of the year, which honestly are probably your easiest 4 games of the year. You get Navy at home. No trash talk about Navy here. You're just a better team than them. You should get that win there. You're going to beat Navy. On the road at Virginia, outside of 1 year when they had, was it Bryce Perkins, the quarterback they had a couple of years ago that was fun to watch. Outside of that, Virginia hasn't been all that good. Maybe they turn it, maybe something happens this year and they surprise me. But as of right now, I've got you winning on the road at Virginia. Then you host Georgia Tech. Still fighting an uphill battle there. Jeff Collins, year 3 now, trying to turn the roster over. After they got rid of Paul Johnson, he, of course, was running the triple option forever there. Jeff Collins running more of a pro-style attack. Got to turn the offense over. I like Georgia Tech's quarterback. I like their running back. They got work to do on defense. Need to find a couple of playmakers at the wide receiver position. And the quarterback's got to keep from turning the ball over this year. Georgia Tech's turnover situation last year was absolutely abysmal. I know the quarterback was a freshman, so you expect him to make a few boneheaded decisions to turn the ball over a time or two. But I mean, Georgia Tech had games last year with 3 and 4 turnovers from the quarterback position, and you just can't win games that way. I do expect Georgia Tech to be better this year, not better enough to beat Notre Dame at home. At home for Notre Dame, I've got Notre Dame winning Week 12 against Georgia Tech, and then you close things out on the road at Stanford. Stanford is so disappointing to me the last few years. I have been one of the biggest David Shaw supporters on the internet over the last few years. I absolutely love David Shaw. I don't know what's happened to him out there. Stanford was an SEC team trapped on the West Coast. They had good defenses, big offensive lines, and great running games. And now they're spreading the field around and throwing the ball around. And they don't have any running backs, and the offensive line isn't that good, and the defense is giving up points. I just don't know what's happened out there. I think Stanford's going to have a historically bad year in 2021. 2-3 win type of season. I think it could be that bad for Stanford this year. You got to travel there. Last game of the year. Who knows what the injury situations will be or whatever, but I just can't see a way possible right now that Notre Dame loses that last game of the year, even though it's on the road. I've got you winning that one. There you go. That's Notre Dame. I've got you going 8-4. Not the record Notre Dame fan is hoping for, I know. And again, maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think Notre Dame's dropping off a cliff like I've heard some people say. It's hard for any team to replace 9 starters on offense. Take a team like Florida, for example. They're in a similar boat to Notre Dame in 2021, right? They had a great team last year, gave Alabama all they could handle in the SEC title game, but that entire offense is gone. Now, Notre Dame's entire offense isn't gone. You get your running back, but replacing 9 starters is just not easy to do. 4 to 5 offensive linemen, Ian Book, and I think you're downgrading at the QB position with Jack Cohn. I do like both your running backs. I just don't know how productive they can be behind that inexperienced offensive line. You lose your best player on defense, and on top of that, a brand new defensive coordinator trying to implement a new scheme and things like that. I think it's going to be a down year for Notre Dame in comparison to what we've seen from them the last 3 or 4 years, which has been 10-plus win seasons. I've got Notre Dame going 8-4. All right, that's it. The first of the 2021 college football game-by-game preview and prediction videos, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I'm going to be having at least one of these videos coming out every single day for the foreseeable future. Who's up next? Should I tell you or should I make you wait? I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. It's Florida State. Yeah, Florida State will be the next one of these that comes out. Hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. It takes me a long time to do these videos. Believe it or not, I do actually sit down for an hour or two and read up on these teams and make a lot of notes before I make these videos. So I know you might not agree with all the conclusions that I come to in terms of Notre Dame's schedule and their overall record and who they beat and who they lose to. But I do put some time, effort, and energy into these videos. So if you could give it a thumbs up, that would really help. Share the video somewhere, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, your Instagram, whatever the case. That would be a big help too. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Don't forget to let me know down below where you think I was wrong. And until next time, have a good morning.